I am pleased now to introduce our current and successful president, Ophelia Wade, who will begin the webinar. Ophelia, are you able to unmute and begin?
I am. I'm ready. That's great to be together today, even though we're so far away from each other, and a very
Ophelia, I've unmuted you on my end. Have you
from the
tried
Rocky
unmuting
Mountains.
on
We were
yours?
hit with an unexpected. I am unmuted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Ophelia, this is Ryan, and I can hear you.
We are experiencing some sound issues with our president's voiceover.
Okay.
Is anyone else able to hear Ophelia?
Yes, I can hear Ophelia.
Okay, it looks like the issue is on my end, so I'm going to go ahead and check on my sound while Ophelia continues.
All right, so let's get started again. Greetings from a very snowy Salt Lake, which I'm excited. I was telling Anne Marie that we were hit with this storm that has caused all the basement of our state office of education. And as a result of that, I was freed from a meeting that was going to intervene with my participation today. So I'm kind of happy. Delighted to have you with us. It's always great to be together. I love seeing that response that you were here today because you were interested in the topic and learning from the expertise of one of our own successful members, and because you love being together with each other, even though it may be virtually. Lisa, if we can move me to that next slide. Don't know if I have control at this point. No. You want to move me to the next slide? I think it's coming.
Difficulties, give me just a moment. There we go.
There we go. So I wanted to start by giving you some of the highlights that we took from the wonderful feedback that you provided us. You know that we feel it's extremely important for us to listen to your feedback and try to be responsive to that feedback. So what did we take away from that feedback? Well, it was very clear that you wanted or want more organic and extended time for unstructured styled interactions, that you found our trial unstructured conference very fulfilling, and you want more and less structure, which I loved. I think now we're ready to do a little more of that. You also made it very clear that sometimes it is more valuable for you to learn from the initiatives by your own successful members, particularly if we give you an opportunity to hear what's happening in your own regions. You favor a lot, you favor the opportunity to have successful expert panels, sometimes more than bringing outside experts, which says a lot about the level of expertise within our ranks. And you rank the following topics as your top priorities at the end of the meeting: advocacy, articulation, dual immersion, and updates and initiatives, and pedagogy, which I thought was really interesting. I do want to tell you that one of the things that was mentioned by multiple members is that sometimes what your priorities are at the end of our annual meetings shift over the year, and that you wanted maybe an opportunity to revisit those top topics closer to the annual meeting, and we're hoping to provide that for you. Next. Great. So what I'd like to do at this time is just give you a brief update on some updates regarding our standing committees and our ad hoc committees. Remember that as stipulated by the bylaws, we have a bylaws committee, a historical records committee, a linguafolia committee, a nominating committee, and a supervisor of the year committee. And those are standing committees that are outlined in our bylaws. And then we have ad hoc committees. We have had the Professional Resource Committee as an ongoing ad hoc committee. And then this year we have put together a Jubilee Committee, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. I noticed that I highlighted Linguafolio because we are going to have the opportunity to hear directly from our Linguafolio co-chairs, and they will give us a much more thorough update on their committee. Next. So our bylaws committee welcomed 2 new members, Terry and Duarte. And Ryan is still hoping to add another member to this committee that would represent our associate membership. So if you're an associate member and would like to represent that voice in the bylaws committee, Ryan will really welcome you into the committee as well as the other members. Our bylaws committee oversees the bylaws of our organization, and this year, for example, they have been involved in proposing and approving some minor amendments that provided some further clarity on membership types. So we thank them for that diligent work. Next. Our Historical Records Committee, Jill Warner has been a member of this committee for a while. She has been very busy with her role with ACTFL and had asked for additional support, so Jackie has volunteered to co-chair that Historical Records Committee, but they're still looking for additional help that would be excited to be part of the highlighted role that this committee is going to play this year as we try to commemorate 60 years of NACESFL legacy. So if you think that you would like to help support those efforts, please give Jackie a call and or Jill, shoot them an email. They'll be happy to hear from you. Next. I think many of you are still relishing the moment that we watch Gregory walk up to accept his Supervisor of the Year award. But with that wonderful moment, now comes the responsibility of chairing the Supervisor of the Year committee. And so Gregory is ready to take on that very covert operation to expand this elite cohort of recipients of this very coveted award and to bring recognition to another very deserving member of our organization. I know Gregory is ready to go, and we won't hear very much from him and his committee until that moment, a moment of highlight, when we again announce the Supervisor of the Year for this 2009 annual meeting. So until then, good luck to Gregory and his committee. Next. So our nominating committee is a committee that is dormant every other year. This committee is responsible for pooling members that could serve our organization. As you know, our officers serve on a 2-year basis, and as we rotate our officers, then the nominating committee has the charge of identifying members that could contribute to the organization in terms of its leadership and those that would be willing to do so. That committee is going to be chaired by our past president, Anne Marie, and so she will soon be calling out and letting you know that we need you. And so we hope that you will be willing to entertain the opportunity to serve our membership through the role of office as an officer on the board. So be willing to say yes when the call comes. Next. And then, because this is a unique and special year, we would be taking the opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate our organizational legacy over 60 years. We feel it's a moment to really recognize what many of you have done and what others that came before us have done, and to look forward to what future generations will continue to do for this organization. So we have asked Greg Roberts, Gregory Fulkerson, Bill Rivers, Lisa Harris, and myself to come together as a committee to plan some special activities that give attention and recognition to this 60 years of legacy on our from Necessful. Next. I want to bring to your attention a survey that will be coming your way in reference to plans that are already being made for our 2019 annual meeting. ACTFL wants to take advantage of the unique opportunity that we have to be in DC, and if you noticed, one of the top topics of interest for our membership was advocacy, which DC blends itself beautifully to support that interest. So ACTFL is proposing to change the format of AOD this year to make it a Hill advocacy activity or experience for our members that can participate, recognizing that in some cases, some of you, because of your particular position, you may be restricted as to advocacy activities. And so they're looking at providing both types of opportunities. Those that are interested in being actively involved in an advocacy experience on the Hill, that would be provided. And then those of us that cannot be active participants of that type of activity, there will be alternative, not advocacy activities that would be available to us. But because of the logistics of coordinating all of these opportunities, it looks like the AOD will extend beyond its half day. So it is going to impact the time that we have set aside to be functioning as an organization. So the survey that will go out to you will give you opportunity to give us feedback on 3 points. Number one, are you able to participate in Hill advocacy activities? If yes, say yes, I'm interested in this. If because of the limitations on your role you cannot, then I want you to mark that you're interested in participating in alternative non-advocacy activities. Another question that I want you to ponder is that given the fact that we will be losing time on Thursday, that otherwise would be organizational time, we are exploring the possibility of extending Tuesday to an all-day event, which is a suggestion that has come to us through the surveys as well. I need you to identify if this will be feasible for you as a member. And then last, I have included in this survey the opportunity for you to indicate if you're interested in being part of an interest-based focus group that will be an extension of the focus groups that we had during our unstructured conference time. Many of you, the feedback that you gave on that was that this is a great conversation, the beginning of a conversation, but we needed more time to continue it. So this is an opportunity to know if you're interested to further those conversations with your colleagues, and then we'll structure some times for you to do that. With that, that is kind of a wrap up of what is an updates on our organization, and we look forward to seeing you in DC. It should be a pretty special time for all of us. So thank you for being with us, and any questions that you have, please add into the question panel. Thank you so much.
All right. This is Anne-Marie Gunter. We're going to continue with an update on our Chinese guest teacher initiative that we have within NSSFL. On the next slide, you see just an overview of this initiative. Of course, NSSFL partners with the College Board, specifically their Chinese Language and Culture Initiatives group, as well as Hanban, and in this year, the Beijing Language and Culture University, which is where the Chinese guest teacher interviews were conducted. Our Beijing interview trip was just finished recently, March 14th through the 22nd, as I said, on the Beijing Language and Culture University campus. We had 91 interviews, both face-to-face and online. The majority were face-to-face interviews. And 3 interview teams, which means we had 3 NSSFL members that were going. Myself, Stacy Lyon from Utah, and Debbie Nicholson from West Virginia. We were joined by colleagues from Go Global and International Leadership of Texas. This provided us with a full interview team, along with our College Board colleagues, so that we could do all those interviews quickly and start matching positions. We do have 142 positions total across the United States for the 2019-2020 school year. And that will mean that we'll have 77 new Chinese guest teachers that we found during this Beijing interview trip. We'll have 45 teachers who are renewing, and they have already been here as a Chinese guest teacher at least 1 year, and 9 teachers who are renewing but relocating to a different school, a district, or state, depending on the placement needs that we have. This next slide shows a map for this coming school year of where those Chinese guest teachers will be located. It's 18 different states and the District of Columbia. Take a moment to find your state or neighboring states that are hosting Chinese guest teachers this coming year. This map has changed over time as part of this initiative, but this coming year we will have 18 states and DC receiving teachers. On the next slide, you get an overview of how many teachers are going to each location. So again, locate your state or a neighboring state to see how many teachers you're getting. As you can see, we have anything from a state getting 1 Chinese guest teacher all the way up to 33, and that's in Utah. So quite a spread across the country. And again, these have changed a little bit over time, but we see continuing interest in this program, and we have very strong partnership with College Board on this initiative. In addition to the Chinese guest teacher interview trip that we do with College Board, we also provide virtual professional development as NSSFL. The teachers who have been selected, the new teachers, will go through what's called pre-departure orientation, PDO. And before that, we have what's called pre-PDO that involves 2 webinars that we do. They're in the Teaching in America series. We also, as a group, provide feedback on homework assignments to those teachers. And then we offer a host institution or a webinar for districts and schools receiving Chinese guest teachers. We do offer that twice. In addition to some of the NSSFL members you've already seen from the interview trip, we'll also have Pam Delfas from Wisconsin and Ryan Wirtz from Ohio, who are involved with the webinar broadcast for that series. And by the way, the Teaching in America series materials from 2018 are available publicly on the NSSFL website under the Resources tab for the Visiting Teacher Program. So if you ever want to see those or see what the content is or use them in your own work, you're certainly welcome to do so, and also share them with others. Also, just an FYI for you, I had mentioned that in addition to doing the webinars, we actually do a bit of a homework assignment with these incoming teachers, and then we have NSSFL members who are providing feedback on that homework assignment. We'll be doing that once again this year. Debbie Nicholson from West Virginia is heading up a team of folks from NSSFL to do that, which includes Pam Delfas, myself, and Jane Malorney from Nevada. I do see a question here in the question box about this Chinese guest teacher initiative. Someone's asking, how does the district get involved with the Chinese guest teacher program? At the beginning of the year, usually in January sometime, the College Board sends out an invitation for any districts or host institutions, so it could be a district, a school, etc., to apply to receive a Chinese guest teacher, and they can ask for one or more Chinese guest teachers. They have to describe the school and the programs that they want to have a Chinese guest teacher in, and then that's submitted and processed. Always look for that information. It is shared publicly. Because we are partnering with College Board, we receive that information, of course, shared on an Accessible listserv. And when we send something out on the Accessible listserv like that as an announcement, we always encourage everyone to also share that throughout their states or whatever group of stakeholders they serve, so that that information gets out as widely as possible.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Next up in our presentations, if there are no further questions for the Chinese guest teacher program, will be an update from our Linguafolio committee, shared by our Linguafolio co-chair, Ryan Wertz.
Hi, everyone. This is Ryan, and today I bring greetings from the Linguafolio committee. Along with Ruta Kue, I have the great pleasure of co-chairing this illustrious group. Ruta isn't able to join us today, so I get the honor of sharing a brief update of our committee's ongoing work to update our organization's nationally known Linguafolio student self-assessment portfolio tool. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is your Linguafolio team, a group of very hardworking Accessible members who represent an ideal mix for keeping Linguafolio relevant to our learners. Some are original Linguafolio piloters from the earliest days of Linguafolio, and others are newcomers to Linguafolio who provide our committee with invaluable sets of new eyes. We're very fortunate also to have a world-class researcher, Ali Moeller, on board with us, who not only has done a 5-year longitudinal study of the use of Linguafolio, but who has also guided numerous graduate students over the years in their subsequent research projects on various aspects of Linguafolio. Next slide, please. Thank you. During the previous 2018-2019 period, the committee devoted their time to taking a hard look at the use of Linguafolio over the last 16 years in the United States. Not only did we receive some great feedback from Linguafolio users around the country, we also noted some interesting corollaries with some of the causes for the demise of the European language portfolio in Europe, upon which Linguafolio was originally modeled. So we decided to focus our energies on Linguafolio as a super autonomous learning tool for world languages and on upgrading our use of technology that would support learners in that journey. As you all know, today's technology is much more advanced than it was 16 years ago when Linguafolio first ventured online via our partner Castles. An updated version of Linguafolio is going to require a new online platform, and I'm going to present how we hope to raise funds to pay for that new platform momentarily in a coming slide. Let's move on to the next one. Thank you. As most of you know, the Center for Applied Second Language Studies at the University of Oregon, or CASLS, as it is known, is our longtime collaborative partner on all things Linguafolio, most notably on Linguafolio Online. CASL's own Stephanie Knight is a key member of the Linguafolio committee, and we're very appreciative of her contributions to our ongoing work. The Linguafolio committee is pleased to announce that along with the Accessible Executive Board, we're in the final stages of finalizing a formal MOU with Castles that will outline each organization's role in the updated Linguafolio, as well as our working relationship for future collaborative efforts. We look forward to having this agreement in place in the very near future. At the last annual meeting, we shared the committee's new framework for Linguafolio with the membership, and we were very grateful to have an initial opportunity to gather some feedback from our membership. Our committee took some time to understand that feedback, and we want to assure you that we're using it to help guide our subsequent efforts to update Linguafolio. As a reminder, here's the graphic that we're using that summarizes the cycle of autonomous learning, the new framework around which we are redeveloping a Linguafolio. The committee is currently developing a set of 2 documents for each of the 4 domains. One document in each domain will be for learners, and the other will be for learning facilitators. These documents will be animated to capture the interest and motivation of our users. And in an upcoming webinar, we hope to showcase examples of these animated documents for you. We're actually very, very excited about this. After much debate that went on for quite some time, the committee decided to keep the tool's original name, Linguafolio, but we also decided we wanted to highlight the autonomous nature of the tool's new design and focus by tagging it with the phrase, personalized learning powered by Linguafolio. And we hope that the new name resonates with you. We had several that were suggested, and this is the one that the committee unanimously landed on after quite a bit of spirited debate. So that is a little new news to share with everyone. Finally, the committee would like to invite the membership to try something new. While we're pursuing the more typical grants to help us build a new platform with Castles, something that we will tell you is quite costly, we also want to engage in some concurrent fundraising activities as well. We first plan to solicit donations from celebrities who speak other languages who have been known to contribute to educational initiatives. And we also plan to ask the general public to contribute to an accessible GoFundMe page. We hope that the membership will actively support us in these endeavors. Before we engage in any of these activities, however, we have sought and received the permission of the Accessible Board to talk to a tax specialist who specializes in working with non-profit organizations like ours, just to ensure that our planned fundraising activities in no way compromise our 501(c)(3) tax exempt status. So there will be more detailed information to follow about the activities of the Linguafolio Committee and the development of our newly reimagined Linguafolio tool, Personalized Learning by Linguafolio, and we hope to offer that information to you via an accessible webinar in the very near future. So thank you very much for listening to our update.
Thank you, Ryan. As always, if you have any questions, please share those in the question box so that we can share them on with the Linguafolio Committee, with Ryan in particular while he's here. We do have, Ryan, one question in the question box asking, will there be a free version of Linguafolio still available?
Yes, we are still doing our best to ensure that no matter what happens with Linguafolio, that in the very least, the framework and these kind of documents that will be undergirding the new Linguafolio will be available to the public. Obviously, the newly envisioned Linguafolio is going to fully utilize technology, which does unfortunately come at a cost. So all aspects of the new Linguafolio probably will not be available online for free, but we're going to make as much of Linguafolio as we can available to the public on a free basis, as we have done in the past. So great question.
Thank you very much. I do not see any other questions at this time, but we will forward any that might come in after we move on to the next section. And at this time, it is a great pleasure to introduce one of our fellow Necessful members, Stephanie Call from Nebraska, who will take us through our learning portion of this webinar around the topic of work-based initiatives, work-based language initiatives. And so, Stephanie, we are going to turn this over to you. And Stephanie, you are self-muted, so you will need to unmute yourself before you begin.
It appears we're having a few technical problems with setting up Stephanie's audio. Give us just a moment to work those out. In the meantime, you might want to go ahead and take a look at the handouts for this part of the presentation, our work-based language initiatives. On your control panel, there's a handouts section that Lisa talked about at the beginning of our broadcast. And so those 3 handouts you will need, you can download each of those right now.
And Stephanie, if you are working to unmute yourself, if that is not working, you might want to try clicking over to phone call, then back to computer audio, just to see if that resets your audio.
Can you hear me?
Stephanie, I have you, but a very severe echo coming back.
Okay. I'm going to try hanging up on the phone.
And we do thank you for your patience as we are working through this section.
Can you hear me now?
Stephanie, that's even worse. That was a really bad one.
Better? Can you hear me now?
There you go. That's better. Thank you all for your patience.
I apologize. Everything was set for the test run before the meeting started, and then suddenly it stopped. Okay, I will make this quick. So we are going to spend a few minutes, less than planned, talking about work-based language initiatives. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. The first thing I want to mention is that there is a bit of a taboo in talking about careers with world language teachers. This became apparent during a meeting that I had here in Lincoln, Nebraska with a group of educators from across the state when I first approached the idea of career readiness in world language learning. And there was almost this sense of being sacrilegious in that it, in a sense, demeaned world languages. And so to kind of work through that lens, I'm going to approach this as initially as storytelling to give you some of my background and why I truly believe that acknowledging languages can enable students, that students are enabled by learning languages to be career ready, does not really lessen the intrinsic value of language learning. Next slide. So during this first portion, the goal is for each of you to be able to identify possible sources of connections to work-based learning in a language classroom. And that is the lens that we're going to take here, the language classroom. You have a poll question. Which of these are associated with Wisconsin? And I know that if Pam is on here, we have a ringer in the group. But please check all that apply. Which of these are associated with Wisconsin? Your choices are dairy farming, crop production, Badgers, Packers, and Vikings. The number of students in small or rural schools is roughly similar to the number of students in city or suburban schools. And curds, brats, and puffs. That's not brats, it's brats. Take a minute to think those through. And I'm ready when you are, Lisa. All right, what do we have for results here? It looks like 100% of you identified Wisconsin with dairy farming and crop production. 86% of you said Badgers, Packers, and Vikings. Technically, that is not correct. Badgers and Packers, yes, but talking about being a Vikings fan in Wisconsin is a dangerous thing to do. It is true that in Wisconsin, the breakdown between small and rural schools versus city and suburban schools is, I think, about, I want to say 58 to 42. It's a number that's not going to show a wide gap. And of course, curds, brats, and cream puffs are extremely popular in Wisconsin. Now, I didn't bring this up just for fun. I brought this up because it helps you to understand the mentality of the students that I would be teaching when I was a teacher in Nebraska. Next slide. So I had several different teaching experiences while in the state of Wisconsin. I think I said Nebraska a moment ago, sorry. While in the state of Wisconsin, over a 16-year period, I taught Spanish to anywhere between grades 6 and 12, middle school and high school. For quite some time, I was in the school district of Albany. I spent 8 years there. Albany is a very small school district, and when I approached the district, I discovered that I would need to have a survivalist mentality. And the reason for that had to do with the logistics. Albany, Wisconsin is a very small town, population 1,100, but it is a rural district in the sense that the school boundaries are actually very large and contain a large amount of farm space. So many of our students came from farms and still worked farm chores in the afternoon after school. 93% of the student population was white, 13% special ed, 33% economically disadvantaged. And when I arrived there in 2002, 2003, 3 of the 30 graduates, there were approximately 30 students to a grade level, 3 of those students went to a 4-year or 2-year college. Now, several went to technical programs of various kinds, several went to the military, but I think it's significant to note that 3 went on to a 4-year or 2-year college. When I left in 2010, 3 of the 30 graduates chose not to go to a 4-year or 2-year college. 2 of those went to a short training program, and 1 of them chose to go straight into the workforce. Now, why is that a survivalist mentality mindset? Because, frankly, I had to convince not just the students, but other staff members, the administration, and the community that world language learning was worth keeping. There were so many programs that were at risk of being cut because this was a small school district that was desperate for funding, that was losing student population, that was competing with other districts in the area for students to open enroll. I had to prove that world languages needed to be part of the main curriculum. When I came on, the students took world language as something fun to do between the important classes. And I was very proud of the fact that in those 8 years, I managed to turn it into a foundational course so that over the course of those 8 years, initially I had something like 3 students enrolled in my Spanish 4 class the first year that I arrived. By the time that I left, we had probably about 33% of the graduating class enrolled in Spanish 4. Take a look at the next page, please. So part of this survivalist mentality drove me to look for community connections. How could I connect Spanish to being something students would actually need to be able to do whatever it is they wanted to do? Since this was Wisconsin, and since we're talking the land of dairy and cheese, this was an easy place to start. So I had heard about this program that was in northern Wisconsin that had to do with the University of Wisconsin River Falls partnering up with a local Spanish teacher to provide Spanish language training to farm workers to satisfy OSHA requirements. I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I happened to come across the book The Milk Makers in Spanish when I was looking through a Scholastic Club Leo order form. I ordered the book and then turned that into a unit that helped me teach students farm vocabulary appropriate to the dairy industry. I ended up making a connection to that program at River Falls because one of my students was so engaged in that project that he ended up going on to pursue a degree in agri-science at River Falls and taking that particular program so that he could come home to the family farm and work with Spanish speakers at his dairy. You'll see there's a video link there that's actually still available, and I'm sure my students would wish I would never show it, but that is the Proyecto de Queso, which illustrates the various cheeses of Greene County, Wisconsin in the Spanish language. It's rather amusing to watch. Next slide. So that was the start. Eventually, I would use my Spanish 3 class, which generally falls during the junior year when students are looking at colleges and careers and trying to determine where they're going to go after graduation. And I decided to build into the curriculum units that were specific to careers. And you'll see here some of those units. So during the emergency unit, I worked with a local nurse. She was a certified registered nurse who would come into my classroom, and she would help students understand what it was like to work in a medical situation with non-English speakers. Now, she herself was a Spanish speaker who had traveled extensively through the Spanish-speaking world on different medical missions, and so her expertise was really poignant, and many of my students responded quite deeply. In fact, I had several that went on to do a medical career, and I believe all of them ended up using Spanish as a minor for that because of their experience with her. The Day on the Farm is the project that I just explained. What's Cooking took the usual cooking lesson that at some point in a world language classroom there is cooking involved. I haven't been in one yet that didn't involve cooking. In our particular case, the students had to prepare a cooking video and they had to research culturally authentic food and then explain how to prepare it. We also talked at that point about Spanish in the hospitality industry and how it applied to, more specifically, restaurants and food preparation. One of my students went from that learning experience to joining a Cordon Bleu school in Minneapolis, and she still uses Spanish on a daily basis, as she is now a chef and she is giving instructions to her staff. Driver's education required students to provide instructions in the care, maintenance, and use of automobiles. I did as much as I could without bringing in the automobile for them to tear apart and put back together. Next slide, please. We also at Albany had something called Career Day. I think most of you have probably a memory of being in a classroom at one point or another with somebody telling you about their day at work. We had a very inventive family and consumer economics teacher who really wanted to put that kind of career day to rest, and she came up with the idea of working students through modules. So we did have a component of the traditional guest speaker who tells about their day. What made it different is that each of us as content specialists were assigned the task of finding 2 or 3 representatives who used our content area on a daily basis, so that we would have to provide a real-life career experience that matched our content area. We also did career assessments and how to fill out job applications as workshops, and invited local technical college support staff to come in and assist with those things. Next. One more source of inspiration on how my mind came to this idea of world languages being career ready had to do with the Greene County Multicultural Affairs Council. So Greene County, Wisconsin, I want everybody, and I can't see you doing this, so I'm going to have to trust you. I want you to take your left hand and stretch it out in front of you. That is Wisconsin. Now, if you look down at the center base of your hand, just above where your wrist and hand meet, that's about where Albany is. It's close. That is Greene County, and Greene County had really an interesting experience. Now, I'd spent 4 years out in the state of Oregon, and while there, I had seen firsthand that many of the immigrants who were from Mexico and Central America were not received well. There were a lot of very difficult issues with immigration in that area. And for the most part, I would say a lot of antipathy publicly expressed towards immigrants. In Wisconsin, at that time at least, there was a different view. Many of the dairy farmers really felt that whether an immigrant was legal or not, they were an important and valued member of the community, and they were desperately needed to keep the farm industry going. Dairy milking is a full-time job, and essentially these large farms run 3 shifts of dairy production a day. That being said, they need a lot of on-site labor that's very dependable. So when they found immigrant workers willing to take these positions, farmers would do anything and everything to keep them. This particular council started with the idea of helping immigrants who were coming into the area for the dairy industry to adjust to their new area. And it grew into a multicultural affairs council when we started to receive immigrants from other parts of the world. There were literacy initiatives in teaching English that were attached to this council. There was community building and outreach, helping businesses to reach out to potential clients and customers. And we even held an immigration summit. Now, during this time, I came to hear from the business community what they truly needed to be able to support this new group of people. And that helped me to start framing my classroom approach in the sense of how can I meet that need from the classroom aspect. One particular example, we had the director of the emergency service program for Greene County come to our council one day and ask us, how on earth do I support my emergency medical personnel in providing emergency support to people who do not speak English? What do I need to do? And as you can imagine, that's a pertinent question. Next slide. My next point of reference is Bigfoot High School, and that is actually the name. It's not a Yeti. It's named for a Native American tribe that was there in the Walworth County area for many years. The Bigfoot High School in Walworth, Wisconsin was a union high school comprised of grades 9 through 12 from 4 different communities, 440 students. There were 3 language teachers, 2 Spanish, 1 French, and we decided to hold something called World Language Week. Next slide. As part of World Language Week, we decided that we would take the theme that had been released nationally, which was connections, language as a connection, as a connector, and we put together these just 1-page flyers and posted them on classroom doors all around the school. Each of us took a particular content area and completed aspects of that content area that applied to world language. So you can see here, mathematics. Algebra, trigonometry, and mathematical astronomy were introduced to Europe through the Islamic kingdom of Al-Andalus of southern Spain. So those of you who love algebra, thank the Moors. Those of you that don't love algebra, well, just be polite, okay? Next slide. So at this point, we'll take a pause, and I just want to reiterate that everything that you saw over these last several slides had to do with experiences that happened in my teaching career that helped me to understand that careers and world language have a normal relationship that is mutually beneficial. By helping students to understand the aspect of careers in world language, I helped strengthen the support for my program with my administration and my community. I also provided students a stronger why as to why learn a world language. And I helped them to open up their opportunities. One of the unfortunate things about choosing a career, whether you're in a small rural district or a large urban one, is that you really only know what you know. And if you think about it, when you're 16, 17 years old, you only know the careers of the people around you. You only know what your aunt does, or what your grandfather did, or what your parents do for a living. You probably haven't heard of all of these other myriad professions that exist. And if you look at the statistics of future learning, there are professions that are currently being invented we don't even have a name for at this time. So think about it. If we are having difficulty putting all of that information together, how then do we expect a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid to be able to figure it out for themselves? It simply isn't possible. So again, my understanding of careers in world language is that of being mutually beneficial. So as we move forward to this next part, it's kind of taking it now to a state level. In the past, I was thinking of the classroom. Now, as a state supervisor for world languages in Nebraska, which is my home state, and forgive me because I still confuse Nebraska and Wisconsin frequently. As a state supervisor, I have to think of this as more of a statewide approach. So coming back to Nebraska, I see that there is a lot about Nebraska career education. Nebraska has this mindset of being very practical, and it's been that way ever since I can remember. If it's not practical, we don't do it. And I think that seems to be an approach that has infiltrated every aspect of our living. So you'll see that even at the Nebraska Department of Education, the heavy focus is on the practical. What is the most practical? Well, earn a job, take care of your family. That's the most practical. And I have to admit, I got a little jealous seeing all of this information about Nebraska career education. Next screen. This particular graphic that you see in front of you is a poster that's on display, I swear, in every room of this state office building. So the Nebraska Career Education Model was developed by the Career Education team, and it divides careers into 6 specific fields and then subdivides those fields into even more specific careers. Take a look at the next screen. You can see then that the broad field is business, marketing, and management, and within that we have branches of marketing, hospitality and tourism, finance, business management, and administration. And then underneath that, you have even more specific jobs. So if you were thinking of this in terms of, I want a job, you would get a job in travel and tourism, which is part of the career field of hospitality and tourism. Next slide. As I came back to look at this career stuff, and again, feeling like I still want to get that world language in there somewhere, I came across this video called The Power of Language, and it's linked in your resources. We're not going to watch it here. It's about an 12 minute video, somewhere around there. Camelia and Cecilia Lopez Jordan are 2 sisters from Miami, and in the video they talk about why they are polyglots. Now, both of them know multiple languages. The older sister, I think she said, is up to 12 or 14 languages. The younger sister, I think, is only around 3 or 4 languages, but she's much younger. I think she's 7 in this video. She starts out by speaking Chinese. And the point of this video that really resonated with me as I was trying to focus where my work was going to go in Nebraska, the younger one says, I know I should tell you that language learning is the thing that I love and it's my passion and it's the most important thing in the world, but truthfully it's not. She goes on to say that she has several other passions, but what she's discovered is that world language, the ability to be bilingual, opens up her audience exponentially. And that idea of the power of language to exponentially grow your audience, to support whatever passion you have, whether it be something like, as she mentions, opera music, I know, she's 7, or designing cars, whatever it is, being bilingual can support that. Next slide. So I got curious. I went back to monster.com and started doing some job searches. I looked for jobs that required Spanish in Lincoln, Nebraska. Next slide. Then I start to get these results, and you can see this is an actual result. So if anybody's interested, we do have some job postings here for Spanish speakers in Nebraska. We also have French, Arabic, and other languages as well. But you can see here that the jobs that started to pop up could easily be categorized by those career fields that we saw earlier on the career model. Next slide. Then I decided, well, let's look at this from a different way. Okay, so I had started by what's in Nebraska that's available. Let's go ahead and approach it from a more language aspect. What are the critical jobs, the H3 jobs, high wage, high demand, high skill, that need bilingual speakers? And this might even be at a national level. And that information is data that's usually computed by various government organizations that track career and workplace development across the country. So I had a lot of different results and a lot of different career fields. Next slide. So What I'm going to show you in a few minutes is what I did with that information. But before I do that, that's okay. Before I do that, I want to take a minute to show you more of how that flip chart was put together. So you see that we have a bit.ly for a flow chart. I want you to open that up. And once you open it up, you're going to see that we have 4 areas. Okay, so we have 4 areas here that can provide information on how to start work-based language initiatives. You can reach out to employers and ask them, what are you looking for in employees? You can reach out for those H3 jobs, basically doing a Google search to find out what are the hot trending jobs in French, what are the hot trending jobs in German, which, by the way, Kansas has quite a few. What are the hot trending jobs in our region, if you want to be more specific. You can also take a look at the local ads. Most local newspapers these days for job postings are using national services like Monster.com. That's how I ended up there. I looked for the Lincoln Journal-Star and ended up on Monster.com. But whatever your local ad service is, find out through those local ads, what are employers posting? What are they looking for in your area? And then fourth, reach out to government and business initiatives to ask them what initiatives currently exist, what's happening. And let me give you an example of this. So some time ago, Lincoln decided that it wanted to be a high-tech city. And in order to do that, they wanted to boost the level of technological infrastructure. They contracted with Allo, A-L-L-O, to bring fiber connections to the city. If you know that something along those lines is coming in, and that's a potential large employer who might have multinational connections, that might be something that influences the job industry in your area in an upcoming way. So 4 different approaches, and you can see that there are questions to consider for each one. Think for a minute about which of those approaches would work for you and be prepared to respond in approximately 40 seconds. All right, Lisa, I can't see if anyone raises their hand, so I'll have to ask you.
I don't see any yet.
I lulled them into complacency with my Nebraska accent, didn't I?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any. Do you need the screen back up with the choices?
I don't, because they've got the link. Let's go ahead and go back to the chart. And for those who are still there and listening, I will explain the 3 parts of the chart. So this is page 1 of a flow chart that kind of illustrates the mental process that's involved with this. And you can see these are things that fed into my decision making. as far as how to start a work-based language initiative and what to do. So I looked at information from employers who are the largest employers in the state, which companies in our state are national or multinational corporations, and which employers review the import and export for possible trends. Why does that matter? Well, I remember very clearly watching a farmer checking the crop prices in Russia because he needed to know what the cost of what the grain he was trying to sell was going to sell at. That particular farmer was reading the grain prices in Russian because that's the language they were available in. For H3 jobs, you can look at the national job trends in hot jobs in different languages. You can look at job sites. There are a lot of companies that work as human resource companies to provide national trend information, and that's a good place to start.
Okay, Stephanie, you do have a couple of questions. The first one, as I'll put the general question out, is there was a little confusion of what you wanted them to raise their hand for.
Would any of these 4 resources for information be doable in their state? Which one would they like to try first and why?
Okay, so I hope that was answer that. And now your next question that you have is, how many hours would you say was necessary to research this information? We love this, but need to set aside a specific work stream.
It was broken up over a period of time, and for different projects, I would say maybe 3 hours to a couple of days. And the reason for that disparity is it depends on how much of this information you have easy access to. Like, for example, the government business initiatives, that was not my research. I contacted the gentleman here who works in our migrant education program because he has a contact in the state agency for business development. I don't remember its actual name. And so he put me in contact with that person who essentially just emailed me a stack of reports showing me employment trends, our largest employers, languages, multinational corporations, etc. So most of that was honestly done by other agencies, and all I had to do was ask. It made my life very easy.
Okay. I don't see any other questions.
Okay. Lisa, could you go back to that for just 1 second? Are you able to see that there are 2 other sheets to that? Try the draw IO diagrams. This was made public for everybody to view. At the bottom of it, there's 2 other sheets. And so essentially this works in a vertical format as well, that you can kind of picture these sheets stacked up on top of each other. So the first phase that you just saw is you may not be able to get to it right away. The first phase that you saw is gathering information, and those were 4 potential places to get information. The second sheet will allow you to look at how to actually create a plan and questions that you might want to answer. And then the third sheet provides ideas for how you can assess the work that you've done. So you can see down at the bottom on the left-hand side, next to phase 1, it says phase 2, and then it says phase 3. Those are separate tabs, like in an Excel spreadsheet. Yep, that's it. So that would be things that you would consider as far as, now you've gathered this information from all of these places, let's put some information back out to them. So contacting the employers and essentially telling them, this is how I want you to support language programming in my state. According to my research, it's my understanding that you are an employer that requires multinational employees because you are transporting goods between Mexico, the United States, and French-speaking Canada. Therefore, you need to have French-speaking and Spanish-speaking drivers. So what are you going to do to help me support world language learning in this state? And in a sense, putting the onus of responsibility on them to better communicate what their needs are, but also to at least provide, clearly monetary support is still a dream, but to at least provide spoken support, human resource support, initiatives to school, partnerships with schools that help students see that there is a tangible purpose to this language learning. Again, working with higher education has been added to this list now that I've started this workplace initiative, because I know that these are things where you can use these languages. Okay, taking that information to the colleges and saying, well, what are you going to do? We have this need to develop French in our state to meet the expectations of this industry that we would like to grow so we can have more jobs. So what are you going to do to support French learning at the higher education level? And again, you can see that there are questions for each one. And then phase 3 goes over measuring your success. This flow chart is available to all of you, and you're more than welcome to ask me questions about it either now or later, or even to email those questions to me. And I'm ready to go back to the slide when you are. Okay. I will, for the sake of time, move ahead, but if anybody does have questions, I don't mind pausing to answer those questions. Lisa will just have to point them out to me when they appear, okay? So the document that you're seeing was the first part of my work-based initiative. I took that career education model component, I asked for a fillable PDF document, and I took the information from those 2 resources of the H3 jobs and the local want ads, put those results together, and came up with a listing that divides careers by languages, or languages by careers. So if you look at the next screen, we have a close-up view that you can see. For business, marketing, and management, hospitality, and tourism, the hot language to know is Arabic. A lot of people probably would have said Spanish, and of course, if you're traveling in another country, it would be any language as it would represent the country in which you're traveling. But here in the United States, there's actually a very hot industry for Arabic. Does anybody want to take a guess as to why? Lisa will watch for hands for me. Why would Arabic be the language for hospitality and tourism? I should say the hot language for hospitality and tourism.
If you will raise your hand, I'll unmute you so that you can share your thought. Okay, Stephanie, I'm not seeing any responses back to your question for that. I do see a question asking about if they can share these resources with their colleagues or if it's just for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you have to answer my question, at least in an email then. Why is hospitality and tourism for Arabic?
So here's one potential answer for you, and that is there possibly are many travelers from Arabic-speaking countries coming here as tourists.
That is part of it. So you have unlocked the key to the next slide. This actually popped up just recently. So Marriott International is hiring Arabic speakers because many of Marriott's corporate offices located in the United States are managing reservations for sites all over the world. And one of the hottest areas of tourism is now the Middle East. And so you have a drastic need for Arabic speakers in the United States to manage these accounts for hotels that are actually located in the Middle East. And in line with that, the University of Nebraska, I know Nebraska, has a global virtual project that is supported by the Aspen Institute's Stevens Initiative and is in cooperation with the Bezos Family Foundation, the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and the country of Oman, the country of the United Arab Emirates, and the country of Jordan, by providing global webinars and coursework to students in all of those countries from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, taught by a UNL instructor who is Arabic, providing information on computer science, creative writing, ethnic studies, hospitality, restaurant, tourism management. So yes, Arabic in tourism is a very important language to know. Next slide. So I started to put together, as one of you had asked, how long did this take you? Well, fits and starts, in the sense that these were all done for different things. So that initial document probably took me a couple of hours to put together. The monster.com and the hot job searches were the most time-consuming component because the document was already created for me. All I had to do was to type in the languages and print it out. Very easy. In a separate initiative, I was working on creating World Language Week, which is a statewide celebration of languages in Nebraska. And for that, I wanted to have graphics that teachers could print out and post in their classroom. And so you see here, these are 3 components. The motto of World Language Week is that the power of languages is to make you college, career, and civic ready. And so there are components that show college ready, components that show civic ready, and these components that show career ready. And these are available on the NDE World Language Week website for any of you to access and print out and keep. The graphic itself was designed by our in-house communications team. The document is something I put together with the information listed below in the statistics at the bottom of each page. But essentially, that helps promote the idea of career readiness related to world languages for both students and teachers in the state of Nebraska. Next. Looking forward to the future, so all of these bits and pieces had been discussed at various points in meetings that I was having with the standards organization groups. So Nebraska is in the middle of a standards revision process. This is our first major it's our first period standards revision since 1997. So as part of that process, we convened a colloquium in January of 2018, and then a World Language Advisory Committee in June of 2018, and then a writing committee in, it was December of 2018. And then I just met with some specific focus groups a couple of weeks ago, and in each of those meetings, I've talked about these various pieces because this idea of being college, career, and civic ready because you are bilingual is really embedded within the new standards document. And again, knowing that some folks have had the mindset of language being valuable just because it's valuable, which is absolutely true, by the way, I didn't want them to be turned off or disenfranchised by this idea of career readiness. I also don't want them to think that's the only reason we study world languages. So one of the key participants in this process has been Dr. Michelle Warren, who is a professor of Spanish at the University of Nebraska, Kearney. And she really latched on to this idea of career readiness and started thinking about how could the University of Nebraska, Kearney, located in the middle of our state and traditionally known as being a more, this is going to sound strange, but the more practical of the three, because traditionally it's had very technical focused programs and certificates. How can UNK kind of effect change with this idea of career readiness in world language? And so what you see here are some possibilities for the future that we're working on now. This idea of dual credit enrollment is to create cooperative efforts to bring technical college and university teaching to high school students. We currently have some teachers in the state. For example, there's one in the city of Kearney and also in the city of Lexington who are high school teachers teaching in the high school building, but have been certified as college instructors by their associate organizations, allowing the students in their courses to gain college credit for the course they're taking during their high school day. This is different than the methods I was most familiar with in Wisconsin, in the sense that in Wisconsin, the student had to leave the school grounds to receive dual credit coursework. So my student at Burlington High School would leave Burlington High School and walk 3 blocks down to the technical college to take coursework there. In this case in Nebraska, that's not commonly done. Students actually stay in the high school building. Dual language immersion in higher education is where UNK really is hoping to move forward. What they're looking at, and this is why I included the report that I presented to them as part of your handouts, they're looking at the possibility of creating a bilingual degree or bilingual certificate or bilingual program in higher education. So if you want to go ahead and go forward to the next screen, here's a better idea of what I'm trying to describe to you. So this actually comes from Bryan College of Health Sciences, which is located in Lincoln, Nebraska, and it's part of the Bryan Hospital campus. It's a small health science college that's actually quite respectable, very, very well known in our area. And this school has a minor in Spanish for health professions, and you can see that it has related coursework attached. So students actually take courses that are in the Spanish language specific to the needs of Spanish speakers in the United States. It really is that true essence of a dual language immersion, but at the college level. And if you think about it, that's really the ultimate expression of language learning. To be able to use the language in real life situations at a high level of technical performance is an extremely high level of proficiency. Next slide. There are some thoughts and considerations as we move forward. Now, as I said, UNK is looking at creating their own program, and they are possibly, I don't think they've come up with a title for it yet, but it's going to have something to do with Spanish is the language of choice, and then it will be, again, similar to a Spanish for the health fields that Bryan has. It will be something along the lines of Spanish for the social service professions, because they have several key areas at UNK, and one of them is emergency personnel responders, another is social work, and I think they're taking legal professions, putting those three together under one umbrella and making it a Spanish in those career fields. So some thoughts and considerations. There are a lot of higher education institutions and types. We have, in Nebraska, we call them community colleges. In Wisconsin, we refer to them as technical colleges. Essentially, those are your two-year programs. Some of those two-year programs, depending on the state, allow for you to roll over credits or to roll over admittance to a four-year program. For example, in Wisconsin, MATC, both Madison Area Technical College and Milwaukee Area Technical College, allow students to complete 2 years of coursework there, and that gives them automatic admission to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is extremely difficult to obtain otherwise. But this level of variety in higher education institutions makes it very difficult to get everybody to the table on equal footing, because the conversation that you're going to have with a technical school is going to be different than the conversation with the liberal arts school. And the conversation with a private school is going to be different than the conversation with a public school. You'll also notice that a lot of technical schools, the two-year schools, usually do have some kind of for the professions language. Now, the most common that I've found, at least in Nebraska and also I think in Wisconsin, generally it was Spanish for, so Spanish for the healthcare professions, Spanish for the legal profession, something along those lines. You'll find that those are fairly common courses at the technical college level, but generally they're not part of an accredited program, and in many cases they're part of a program for continuing credits more than anything. But if you could imagine, Spanish for medical translations is generally a certified course, meaning students can gain a certificate allowing them to become a certified medical translator in a facility. So it's actually tied to a career-specific requirement. Can you imagine if high school seniors were allowed to take that class? In Burlington, Wisconsin, they were. And that meant that when they graduated, they could immediately enter the career field as a certified medical trainer once they'd completed the required exam, successfully, of course. They could actually gain that certification and start work as a certified medical translator with their high school experience. Again, what better use of the language can you imagine? Another thought and consideration is the organizing system. So in Nebraska, we have the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which, unlike Wisconsin, only has four branches. We have a central office that is supposed to oversee each of those four branches of the university, but each branch operates independently. And oftentimes that central office isn't really aware of what's happening on each of those individual campuses and doesn't really have authoritative control over those individual campuses. So it's difficult to get to know the organizing system for higher education. And frankly, there's a bit of a club mentality. There are some folks in higher ed who have this idea that what I do is so technical or so skilled that it could never possibly apply to K-12. And helping to overcome that is going to be strategic to any kind of partnership that promotes technical language learning in the K-12 scenario. But yet, that relationship for K-20 has to exist to make this possible. Moving forward. So, this is a question that we talked about at our last NACESFL meeting in New Orleans. We talked about higher education. We had a whole panel discussion on how to reach out K-20. So I have a question for you, and you're welcome to raise your hand to respond, but you can also follow up in the shared Google document. So how do we reach out to colleges? And maybe you've got a good example to share. How do we reach out to colleges, technical colleges, and universities to create a common language and dialogue for dual language programming? How do we strengthen the K-20 pathway upwards and downwards? In other words, we're building our students to reach those levels, but they're also supporting our students to reach those levels. How do we strengthen that pathway upwards and downwards to support career-based language learning? I am demanding that at least one person raise their hand this time.
Stephanie, I am not seeing any hands raised, but I do see a note that Alfonso says that his CTE folks will be contacting the Nebraska CTE folks soon.
Thank you. I'm glad you're on here, Alfonso.
Okay. And I do see one additional note now. One note is sometimes we need to take the initiative and speak to people at the college level to create programs.
I think that is so well said. That is so well said. I haven't encountered outright resistance, and I think that's a very positive thing. Nobody says this is a bad idea. Generally, they say, I'm not sure how. And that's okay. It's not really a negative response. It's still something that can be worked through with time and effort.
I started to see the hand go up, but I think it went right back down.
I have one that says panelists only.
Okay, nope, it's back down.
I won't read it out loud because it says panelists only. Okay, well, thank you. And again, please, please, please share your thoughts with this on, okay, I can read that out loud. All right, so this one says, since we can't do it all, we can engage our state language teacher organizations and have them work side by side with us to engage these other stakeholder groups, including the post-secondaries. I really like that, Ryan. I've been very lucky with the Nebraska International Language Association in that they have been very willing to cooperate in any initiative that I've brought to them. And I'm sure many of your organizations are the same. I remember, is Pam on? Wisconsin's association is phenomenal. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I told you before that this idea of career readiness is really embedded within the new standards document. And again, please remember that there's technically 3 parts here. We're just focused on one of them. It's college, career, and civic ready. But for today's purposes, we're focusing on the career readiness piece. This is a cutout of our standards as they are being revised. So please understand this is a draft and it's going to change. There is an inborn why in this idea of career readiness. It really helps students to make a connection as to why they are taking a language course. What's the point of this? And it is difficult for those of us that just love language learning to think that we even have to ask the question why, because the answer is so obvious. But in many cases, when you're dealing with high school students especially, why matters a lot. If they don't see an immediate need, this is the generation of immediate gratification. If they don't see an immediate need and an immediate benefit to themselves, then frankly, it's not something that is going to receive a lot of attention. So within this standards document, we have strands and we have standards. So strand 3 is that students use the language studied to reinforce and further their knowledge of other content areas of study. And this just simply helps students to connect. And I will emphasize that the common understanding of this document is that all of our strands are done in the target language. So there is this understanding that when a student is gaining information about other content areas using the target language, they're going to start making those language connections. They're going to start realizing that I said Spanish because that's my language. The language, the target language, applies in other contexts. So it's not just that I'm learning Spanish to be able to say, this was always said to me by another teacher, and it made me want to scratch a chalkboard. I'm not learning Spanish so I can say taco, burrito, and enchilada, except she said enchilada. I'm learning Spanish because it will help me to get the scholarship that I want, to attend the culinary arts school that I want, so that I can be a chef because that's what I want to be. So those components will start to emerge as students begin to use resources in the target language to gain information across other content areas. Next slide. In strand 3, standard 3.2, we take it a little bit further by expecting students to apply the target language. And I should note here that target language is not used anywhere in the document because we were instructed to use language that a layperson would understand, and target language was not a commonly used term outside of the language community. So students apply the language of study to discuss other content areas of study. So again, they first found resources, now they have to talk about it. Next slide. But this is where it really starts to drive in. Students in strand 4 can apply their world language skills to personal, community, and/or career experiences. This is requiring students to initiate conversations on familiar and common topics outside of the language classroom. This could relate to personal experiences, but this could also relate to career experiences. So let's say, for example, that the student is at this point studying automobiles. Their job is to find an advertisement in Spanish for a vehicle, or to contact a local insurance agent for automobile insurance to ask what resources are available in Spanish for the customer. State Farm has quite a few, by the way. They have to look for ways that that language is actually used on the job. Next slide. And then standard 4.2 requires that students use knowledge and skills gained in the language to identify and create a personal education and/or career plan. And if you read across, this is actually one of my favorite ones because this was hard. This was really hard to write. We attempted this as a team, and we really struggled with it because, frankly, we didn't have the expertise needed. This isn't just about the language. This is about a skill set that involves career readiness. And if you think about it, that's not something that's typical to second language acquisition training. So in order to put this together, I reached out to the specialist at the Department of Education here, who is responsible for the specialty area of career planning. She's essentially the lead school counselor for the state. And I asked her, What do you do to help students in the elementary school understand careers? What do you do at the middle school to help students understand career options? What do you do at the high school to help students actually prepare for careers? And that's what's reflected here. And to me, again, this is very exciting because that Nebraskan side of me says this is so practical. You are going to explore vocabulary related to careers. How easy is that? I learn how to say chef. I learn how to say pharmacist. I learn how to say doctor. I learn how to say writer, author, artist. I'm sure many of you are thinking of common vocabulary units that you've taught that reflect on those very words, or units that at some point incorporated a person word that referred to a career type. Moving up the scale, you can see an intermediate low. By that point, we're asking students to use the language of study to relate educational and career interests through content-specific tools. Again, I love the practicality of this. This idea of students should be able to say, and this is for my Spanish speakers, I'm not sure if I remember enough French to do this, but for Spanish speakers saying something along the lines of me gusta, and then whichever job activity they like. No me gusta, and whichever job activity they don't like. Moving on to advanced low, by that point they should be able to develop and list educational and career connections to a personal plan of language learning. I want to because. I hope to because. Think of those language connections. It's something that is so intrinsic in terms of the language structures that are commonly developing along those levels, but yet to apply them in this way is something that I think many of us might have done periodically here or there, but this is asking teachers to give it a place in the curriculum when they move forward. And I believe we're coming close to the end.
And
so we have a questions box.
And if you do have any follow-up questions for Stephanie, you can go ahead and put them in the questions box. We do know that a lot of people are starting to move on to other meetings. But this has been lots of comments, Stephanie, in the box saying that it has been a wonderful session with lots of great ideas and resources, thought-provoking, and thank you for the great presentation. We had several of those items come up, and I'm sure some more will come in. So the next phase of this going on is for us to thank Stephanie very much for this presentation. Lots of folks are saying that they are planning away in their states about the ideas that you've presented today, and I know many more will be coming in as well. Right before we sign off, one final reminder, don't forget about the upcoming PD opportunities for inaccessible members. We would love to see more of you get engaged in the conversations that will be taking place during our Inaccessible Cafes, which take place on those Friday finales time. These are very free-flowing thoughts, and you have a lot more opportunity to participate then and to share your thoughts as well. So please plan to join us for those. You will get additional information in the listserv. And again, just that reminder, keep putting those questions in that you have for Stephanie. We will gather them all up and send a copy to of the questions to her so that if there are any that still need answering, she will be able to do that. And don't forget also that this entire presentation will be made available to the members in the members only section of the Naccessible website. Stephanie, if you have any final wrap-up comments before we go, again, thank you for sharing, and what wonderful information.
The only thing I would say is that if you saw something here that you would like a copy of, almost all of it, I think, is available on the NDE World Language website, probably under World Language Week.
Okay. So again, thank you. I am going to stop the recording.